Welcome back to another episode of the On Becoming Legend podcast. This week, we're talking with Aaron Parkinson. Who is Aaron Parkinson? Aaron Parkinson spent more than 15 years creating and marketing businesses in industries like fitness, finance, and now runs a marketing agency called 7 Mile Media. To date, he's built businesses that have generated over $100 million in revenue and served hundreds of thousands of humans worldwide. And most importantly, he's a dedicated husband and father. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rory.
Hey.
How you doing today, my man?
So good. As good as I can be with quarantine and, all that stuff going on in the world. But yeah, I can't complain. Sun's coming out. We're getting close to summer. We're doing well.
And you're doing your favorite thing right now.
That's it, man. Talking to people, learning about them. Can't beat it. Cannot beat it.
The next Joe Rogan emerging.
Hey, I'm all about it. I put my little studio out in the backyard and, probably not as big of a weed smoker as he is, but, everybody has their thing.
Give it time, man. Give it time.
Just got to graduate to it. So I found a little bit about your story online, and we're going to talk a lot about that. I want to talk first. We're going to, I'll try to go in order as much as I can just because it is easier for my brain to follow. But I want to start by talking about soccer, which, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but this was really the first career path for you when you were younger. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia. In Canada. And, it's just pretty normal neighborhood, normal middle-class family, played a lot of sports. Like I look at our generation now, and I was saying the other day, I mean, you may not, you're a little bit younger than me, but I think about it now, like how I never saw my parents from 7 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, because 6 o'clock at night was dinner time. And that was and we didn't have phones, right? So, the only thing that you knew was you had to be back at home by 6. Right. So I would get up at 7, get ready for school, make my own lunch, ride my bike to school, do the school thing, play sports after. My parents knew if I had practices that were going to go past 6 o'clock, but if I didn't have practice that night, I had to be back at 6 o'clock for dinner. That was the communication tool was 6 o'clock dinner. Like, Think about that right now. Think about how bizarre that is in today's current world, that was the communication portal.
Right.
I could have been dead, bleeding in any random part of the world, and nobody would have known.
Yeah, because even if you don't show back up by 6, your parents aren't really worried until bedtime. Like they might be upset with you, but they're not freaking out until maybe 7, 8, 9, and then they're starting to get a little worried.
Then they start calling your friends.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Is he at such and such house? Is he at such and such house? Like,
right.
Think about letting your kid leave your house. You got a daughter, right? How many kids you got?
3.
You got 3. So I got 3 as well, right? So how old is your oldest one?
4.
4. Okay. So give it 3 more years for your oldest one, and imagine them walking to school by themselves and coming home from school by themselves and maybe having a little after school activity, no phone. Like, is that even a possibility in your world?
I want to be able to tolerate that. That would be ideal for me. Cause just like you, I think about when I grew up at 6 years old, walking at least a half mile, maybe even more to school by myself, 20-degree weather in Illinois. Yeah, no problem. Coming home, parents are gone, sitting down, doing my homework, just at home by myself with my younger brother. Like, we were fine.
And now we would literally call, parental services on somebody if they let their 7-year-old do that.
Right.
Think about the difference in time frame.
For sure.
Right. So the long way around to that is I played a lot of sports. I played basketball. I played baseball. I played soccer. I played rugby. I played football. I played volleyball. Just anything to stay busy, right? And I ended up being decent at 2 of them. I ended up being decent at soccer and baseball. I got to play at what we call, like, in the U.S. would be a state level. Okay. I got to play at a provincial level for both of them, and I was asked to make a decision by my coaches, like, which way are you going to go? Because we want more of your time. And what
level was that at where they started to try to get you to choose?
I was 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems like a pretty prudent move. I mean, at some point you got to commit, right?
Yeah, well, and you know, when they start like suggesting to you like, hey, they don't pay you, but like if you get carded at the national team level, you get like a stipend and you get like all these other things,
Okay.
and it's kind of like they're paying you, right? And I wanted to go to college on a scholarship, so you know, you got to be like really good at something, so
Yeah.
you know, you really wanted to like zone in on that one thing, and I think I liked baseball better. But I was a better soccer player than I was a baseball player.
Got it.
So I chose soccer. I still played other sports, just
Mhm.
not at the same level.
Right.
So, you know, I remember very clearly playing, you know, my first year of rugby. And rugby's not huge in the US, but, you know, it's slow football without pads.
Right.
And, you know, as soon as my coaches found out for soccer, they were like, there was zero chance that you
No
were
way.
doing this anymore, right? Like zero pops. I only was in 3 games and I had my first concussion. So, you know, they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, right.
It's a nasty sport. You know, I
Yeah.
love it, you know, but they were like, well, you were grooming you for, you know,
Right.
where you want to go. So I played at a club level, at a provincial level, and then I got invited to the National Development Center, and where they started grooming you for the national team. And then when I turned, like 18, they said to me, "Are you going to grow anymore?" Because I'm like, you know, at my peak, I was 5'11", maybe 5'11 and a half, and
Right.
I was a goalkeeper, and you know, World Cup level goalkeepers are like 6'4", 6'5", you know, somewhere in that range, and I'm
Yeah.
5'11", and you know, they're like, "Hey, man, you need to keep going vertical if you're gonna
Right.
end up, you know, where we need to be." And I wasn't. So I got cut, and I decided to take out my angst in the mixed martial arts world instead. So I just transitioned right into a fighter's gym, and just head down in Victoria with a guy named Stan Pederek, who was the 2-time world Muay Thai kickboxing champion,
Okay.
and was grooming a bunch of people, teaching them jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and wrestling. And, you know, it was really the first MMA gym, you know, in the West Coast of Canada. And I just immersed myself in there to, like, you know, salve the wounds of being cut as an athlete. And I
Sure.
did that for a few years and made, you know, my goal was to try and get in the UFC. They took my weight division out of the UFC. So I don't know how big of a UFC fan you are, but back in the day when it first got started, they didn't have that many divisions. And one of those divisions was lightweight, which is 155. And that was their lowest weight category when I was trying to get into it. And they thought that weight class was too boring because not enough people got knocked out. So
That's
they
funny.
took the lightweight division out for 4 years. If you go back and look at the history, they just said, we're just not having it anymore. Nobody wants it. And
Wow.
now the 155, you know, for like the last decade, the 155-pound weight division is one of the most exciting because guys have power, they have endurance, they have technique. You know, it's you know, that and 170 is such an amazing you know, couple of divisions. So anyways, they took my weight class out, and I was like, okay, clearly I'm not destined for athletic greatness because these roadblocks keep happening. So I
So
packed up.
what did that progression look like though? So you obviously you face that setback with soccer, you switch to the MMA or UFC. Kind of how long, what did the MMA journey look like in terms of how long it was? And then how close were you? I mean, were you like on the cusp of trying out for the UFC, or had they said you're good to go and then they just?
No, we basically, so I grew up in Vancouver, and then I went to, you know, when I got the soccer thing kind of pulled up from underneath me, I wanted to change. So I moved to Vancouver Island, and I went to university there instead. And the head coach basically showed up at my door at that university and said, we want you on the team. We heard you're here, you transferred, we want you on the team. And I was like, dude, I'm just over this at this point. Like
Right.
I was angry, and I'd played 6 days a week for 10 years. I was like, I still need a break mentally
Right.
from this. And that was a bad mistake because they won the national championship that year, you know, and that would have been fun to be a part of that. But
Yeah.
you know, I just wanted to do something else. And I was in Victoria on Vancouver Island at that point, and I just started looking up like martial arts gyms, like is there anything good? Because I had done martial arts when I was a kid, like from 5 till 12 in like a traditional martial arts studio.
Right.
And so I was looking for like a fighter's gym. Like I wanted to go hit something and be hit. I was like, Fight Club had just come out, if you remember.
Absolutely.
And I was like all angry still, and was like, I'm not even, I want to go hit some people. I want to be hit, you know, like that was kind of where my mindset was at that point. And so I rolled into the gym, and the owner, Stan, he said to me, have you trained before? And I said, yeah. And he goes, what's the highest belt you have? I said, I have a brown belt in karate. He goes, great. You want to wear it? I was like, I don't care. You know, he's like, well, we recognize all belt levels. I said, okay,
nice.
You know, that's cool. So he goes, well, I'm going to put you with another brown belt then today. And I was like, great. So he grabs this girl, pulls her over, super pretty girl, like stunning. Right.
Yeah.
And he goes, you're going to spar with Carrie today. And instantly in my brain, what does my brain say? My brain's like, a girl? Right? Like, yeah, like, come on, man. Right. And
kind of an insult, not sure if it's a trick.
Yeah, like kind of awkward, like all these things, and she's pretty.
Right.
You know, it's like all these things.
Like, I got to hit this girl in the face.
Yeah, like it was just all types of awkward layered on top of each other. So I go in there and we glove up, and I kind of give her a couple of like, how's it going? You know, trying to be light.
Right.
And she just takes her right leg and picks it up and goes, whoa, right across the side of my head. And it doesn't even touch the ground. It just comes right back with the heel. Wow, right in the side of the head. And I am like on the ground. And she goes, I don't need any pity from you. And I was like, holy cow. Like, wow. I just got kicked twice in the head by this girl in the first like 10 seconds. And I was like, instantly, I'm in the right place.
She was there for the same reason as you. She's like, I'm here to be hit. I want somebody to hit me.
She, her name's Carrie Crothers. You can look her up for fun sometime. She ended up being the Canadian Women Muay Thai champion. She ended up fighting in like King of the Cage and all these different organizations. And she trained my kids for a few years, you know, when we got older, and just an awesome, awesome girl. So I knew I was in the right place, and I spent the next 4 years daily in there, just grinding and started to fight on the amateur circuit, and, you know, working my way up through that. And, you know, I would say I was probably 1 year away. Like the Ultimate Fighter had just come out, and I was like, I'm going to go to the Ultimate Fighter show and do tryouts. And I was maybe like 1 year away from making a real dent in where I wanted to go. I was looking at Jens Pulver, who was the champ at the time, and said, okay, he's on the list for me. I was starting to train for his style.
Right.
And then when they took out the division, you know, my coach basically said, well, you can either, you know, start pumping a lot of drugs into your body.
Yeah. What was the next one up from
170? 170 was the next one up. So like,
yeah, just a few months work, right?
Yeah. I was walking around at like 159. Like back then, like now guys cut 20, 25 pounds. I was cutting like 5. Right. So for me to go to 170 meant I had to put on 15 pounds of muscle, and even still I'd be 20 pounds lighter than the guy. Like George St. Pierre was what came into, and Matt Hughes, they came into that time, and they were like literally twice the size of human beings that I was. So I just, you know, I think the world's trying to tell me something.
Yeah.
You know, I wrapped it up. I took one more kick at the can when I was 29. I went up to Vegas. And do you know who Quentin Rampage Jackson is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Rampage and Zach Light, who was an Olympic wrestler, and a couple other guys, they decided to put on like a little camp in Vegas. And I went down for 3 days. And it was sort of my like last, like, do I have it, what it takes to make this? I'm just going to go prove it to myself. I'd made a little bit of money, and I had time to kill. And
right.
I went down there, and the very first day, all we did was wrestling, like just wrestling. And there was those like Iowa farm boy, you know, like you could knock on them, like on their muscles, like no neck, like just
right.
different type of human being. And I just got just murdered by these guys. And, you know, the next day after that, we did stand up, and they were nowhere near my level of striking at that point. But it's a lot easier for a grappler to take a striker off his feet.
Yeah.
For a striker to take a grappler out with one shot.
Right.
So at the end of it, I said to Rampage, you know, like, what am I really looking at here if I wanted to make it go? You say you need 3 years basically of wrestling every day. And then you'll be good enough to keep people off you so that you can deploy the strategy that you want to deploy. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not, you know, wrestling for the next 3 years just to chase this. So that was the end of that.
So I'd like to go back a little bit. You sort of glossed over the decision to kind of hang up your hat, you know, before the camp, but I'd imagine that wasn't just like a one night you were having dinner and you're like, I'm done fighting. Like what was that, sort of realizing that this path that you were on was going to end? I mean, how do you remember how you approached that or how you felt about it? And how did you go about navigating where to go next?
I think at that age, there wasn't as much navigation as there was just reaction. You know, we're talking about early 20s, you know, and at least for me personally, I didn't have enough structure to be, you know, the kind of person to sit down and be like, like what's next?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very much reactionary. And, you know, I had met my wife, my as of now wife, and knew that the sport thing just wasn't going to work. And now I'm bartending and serving tables and doing what you do in early 20s, and was like, you know, I guess I'm not going to be an athlete, but I don't really have like a college degree or a skill or a desire even to be something specific, you know. And she had just graduated college. So we're like, well, you know, okay, what are we going to do? And the most genius thing that we could come up with was, well, we're bartending and serving tables anyway, why don't we do them in the sun? You know, so that was like the huge like aha plan, you know. And she had an American grandfather, so she could have gone to Hawaii or Puerto Rico, but I couldn't. And one of our friends said, hey, there's this place that you can go to called the Cayman Islands. That's a British Commonwealth country, so you can go there as Canadians and work. And we didn't even know where it was. I hadn't even heard of it. Like when someone says a country, like have you ever been in that position where someone says a country and you're like, I don't think that's real. You know, and I remember like even the first like 5 people I told I was going, they went, the Canary Islands? And I went, no, the Cayman Islands. And they went, huh? Right? Like there's still some Eastern European countries sometimes I hear where I'm like, that's not a real.
100%. I'd even heard of the Grand Cayman Islands before I ever met you or figured out where you live. But it was like last week before, for some reason, I looked at it on a map and I was like, that's where that is. Like, I don't know where I thought in my mind that it was, but I was like, wow, I did not think.
No. And people go, where is that? And I go, okay, well, here's Florida, here's Cuba, here's Jamaica, and here's us, like dead center in the middle of Gulf of Mexico. Right. And it's up until 5 years ago, there were still maps I looked at that wasn't even on it. I was like, wow, we don't even qualify to have a spot on the map. Funny. You know, and we would buy those maps like for collector's items, right? But yeah, we flew down here and we just got to work, man. Like, you know, we started serving and bartending, and I think probably the Tom Cruise Cocktail movie probably inspired a little of that back in the day. And like, how bad can it be? And it was, yeah, man, we came down here in white sand and teal water, and we just fell in love. Like, we just love that Caribbean beach lifestyle.
Yeah, it's definitely got its appeal. I'm really curious, and I relate a lot to what you said about, you know, when you were younger, there wasn't like a lot of depth of thought to what you did. You just kind of reacted to what life was giving you. I experienced a lot of that in my own life. I'm curious though, especially when you were younger, who were the people or the influences in your life that you were seeking approval from? Like, I know for me, it's always been my family, my mom, my dad, like that. I made decisions as a young kid or teenager and even later teenager based on getting the approval from them, either consciously or subconsciously. And I'm just curious, who was that influence, or who had that role for you as you made decisions and kind of moved through your life in those years?
I think that subconsciously, and I think it's probably very common, consciously half and subconsciously half. It was probably from my dad's, plural. You know, my actual dad, my real dad, he was he was like a clinical alcoholic, right?
Mm.
So my mom kicked him out when I was, couldn't have been more than four or five.
Oh, wow.
Four. And so we did the single mom thing for a couple of years. And then, you know, he would just drift in and drift out because of his problems, because of his disease. And then, you know, one day he just drifted out. I was maybe 8 or 9. He just disappeared. And, you know, my mom had started dating this guy and had married him. And he adopted me when I was 8. And I was super happy to have like that stability and, you know, all of those kind of things. And he was a really good person. And, you know, my real dad couldn't get his mind wrapped around the fact that I was getting adopted and changing my name. Like, his biggest concern was that I was changing my name and I was the last line of that name in that family.
Right.
So that family's name died when I changed, when I got adopted. Mm-hmm. And even at 8 years old, I could understand that he called me when I was 8 and he was drunk and he was like, "What do you mean you're changing your name?" And even at 8, I knew how stupid that conversation was. Like, we're really having, like, shouldn't you be more concerned about the fact that I'm having to get adopted?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Then I'm changing my name. Right. And then, you know, I didn't see him again after 19. I haven't seen him since. I saw him once between the age of 8 and 19. Saw him once when I was 19, and then I never saw him again. And then my stepdad, when when I was about 18, my parents started to have friction, and they divorced. And it wasn't a very pleasant divorce. Yeah. And really from that point on, you know, in his mind, he wants to be my dad, but he's never shown up that way since that day.
Right.
You know, so I think that there's always been some motivation to, like, prove them wrong as much as it is, you know, show them maybe that I'm worthy. You know, because neither one of them really gave a shit at different times of their life that I existed. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I can relate to that so much because you know, my parents didn't get divorced until I was 14, but it was coming when I was 10 or 9. I mean, it was just like several years of just very tense home life, you know, no abuse, thank God for that, but like very between each other was just a lot of yelling and tension and stress and fighting. And it's like, I think, you know, more than anything as a young kid, I didn't understand it here, but I felt it and was just very aware of it. And on the backside of that, you know, no fault of my parents, they were both busy with their own stuff, but I never got a lot of the validation that I was looking for. I mean, I always tried really hard in school and wanted to be good at things and all that, but they were just so busy with their own things that were going on. I never really got that. So that was a big driver for a big part of my life, was like proving that I can do it. I have it. I'm good enough, you know, all of that stuff. So I totally relate to that.
Yeah. And I think that you got to get to a little bit older in life to realize that maybe that was the driver, and B, when it gets real weird is when you start to look at it and go, are they the reason that I'm successful? Do I owe them a thank you for their behavior? Then it starts getting real twisted.
Yeah, I have, in that sense, I have a real unique perspective, I think, on tragedy, because I'm very slow to think of something as being tragic. I think things are tragic if your timeline is very short, but when you zoom out, I think that most things that people go through, um, adversity breeds character. I mean, it's a poster, it's a bumper sticker, like it's a fact. So
Right.
yeah, 100%. Like, we are better for the things that we have suffered through. And this was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you in regards to, like, you're dealing with those setbacks. Like, I know athletes, and it's a big deal when you go to the next level and they're like, man, you're not what we want. Like, that's a massive blow for an athlete. And you went through something like that twice in just a certain number of years. I'm curious, how do you think, or have you experienced any situations later in life that you look back at and you're like, I'm totally prepared for this, or was prepared for this because I already dealt with this thing back when I got rejected as an athlete, and had to deal with sort of the identity issues there?
I feel like I've always had a short memory, like I've always just moved on to the next thing. And, I've always been super driven, like my parents or my wife or my friends, like I bought, and you may be too young for this, like I bought Don Lepre's tiny little ads classified course, off an infomercial when I was 16. Right? Like I was like, I'm going to place ads in newspapers and I'm going to be a millionaire by next year. And like,
Yeah.
I don't even remember how I got the money, like to buy the thing. Like I was thinking,
Right.
like, I didn't have a credit card. Like, I don't even know, I might've mailed it in, and my mom doesn't understand me at all. She's like, I don't know where you came from. You are not like us. You're way, way more driven. You're way more business focused than we are. Hey, what's
Sorry,
happening?
hold on. Come on, baby. That's beautiful. Let's go. Let's go. Hey, babe, will you keep them up there? We'll lock this door.
Gotta have them locks in the house. I get it.
Sorry for that interruption.
Yeah. Well, tell me when you want to cut back in.
Do you remember the question I asked you? I don't know I can't remember how far you were into your answer, but wherever you want to back up.
You asked me if I was mentally prepared for things that were going to come next.
Yeah, based on that experience and how that set you up. And you were talking about having a short memory.
Yeah, and so just to answer the question, I think I've always had a short memory. I think part of athletics creates that for you.
Yeah.
You gotta learn from your losses quickly, and you can't linger on your wins too long. And for me, I was a goalkeeper and a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As a goalkeeper, you're not even really part of the team. You're either the hero or the GOAT.
Right.
You're the savior of the day, or you're the person that everybody looks at like you blew it.
Right.
Even when I played baseball, I played back catcher and shortstop, right? Which you're glaringly wide open if you make a mistake.
Right.
Hugely. Those two spots are the most glaring when you make a mistake, but it's risk reward. They're also very obvious when you do something amazing.
Right.
Right? You can't hide in those spots.
Yeah.
Right? As a goalkeeper, you can make the most amazing save and everyone's like, oh my God, you are amazing. And you can make one mistake in 10 games.
Yeah.
And people will talk about it for the whole year. They'll play it on replay for a decade.
Right.
Right? How many mistakes does the midfielder make? 40 a game.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Right.
Right? Goalkeeper takes his eye off one second and it buzzes by him with something he should have had. It's on ESPN for a decade.
Right.
Right? So I've always been mentally tough, because of the things I've been through and because of the positions I played. Same with a fighter. You want to talk about something stressful? Tell all your friends that your family, your wife, your wife's friends, your wife's family, tell every single one you're going to fight a guy in 30 days in a stadium down the road and you want them to come watch.
Yeah.
And then just sit on that for 30 days, right?
Right.
The combination of, oh my God, am I going to embarrass myself? Oh my God, the whole manliness thing. Like, we don't want to look weak to people. We value the alpha side of men. then there's just that pure physical violence. Like, am I actually going to get hurt? Like, is actually something going to go wrong? And then there's the thing, you're guaranteed to be in pain. Like, for sure you're going to go to the hospital. It's just like, for what? Like, for what level? And then just sit on that anxiety for 30 days. Like, you were in the military. I'm sure you went through a lot of the same psychological stuff when you're preparing to deploy, right? The only difference is, like, in this is, you're going to get hurt. Right. The day you're going to get hurt. Yeah. And that all the people that you love are going to watch you get hurt, like, in live, right? So you talk about a zero-sum game of athletics. Like, if you have the balls to put yourself up on that situation, like, you're already mentally strong, and if not, it will make you stronger. There's no question about it. So I think I've always forced myself into experiences that made me durable. And it's been, it's been real helpful. Like, I lost everything about 5 years ago, millions of dollars, was in debt to the government, like everything, like, as far low as you can go. And how I got out of that was every morning I put myself in a CrossFit gym with my really good friend Bruno, and I just worked out until I was going to die, like, every single day. And every single morning I would wake up and my shoulders would go up in my ears and my heart would start jamming with anxiety from my situation. Yeah. I would go work myself to the point of death, and you would know what I'm talking about, but a lot of people wouldn't. Like, if you go do a CrossFit workout, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, absolutely. Like, where you literally are unsure if you're going to live anymore, after it. And then all the volume would come down, right? Because things just weren't as like important. Maybe compared to death, they weren't as important, right? Like, I've always used sports and competition to keep myself grounded that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, that's obviously a huge comeback story, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. I really, the thing that this is a recurring theme that I've noticed in the conversations I have with people, that everybody who succeeds at some point starts to become self-directed. They are in charge of the path that they're on. And I mean, I can draw a line between the people who do it sooner and the people who do it later. It's like, it is a prerequisite for success. And I'm looking for those. It sounds like you've been that way almost from, teenage years, where you weren't really bought into, like, doing what you felt like you had to do. Like, oh, I got to go to college and get a degree and do this and that. It was like, you were pursuing the things you wanted to do. So I would love to hear you talk about the birth of your daughter, because I understand that to be kind of a turning point for you, where, in a sense, things got very real for you, and you kind of realized that you still, needed to walk your own path, but you needed to show up in a different way.
Yeah, she was definitely the catalyst of my first major life shift, for sure. And, when she was born, we had moved to Cayman. We had bartended for a couple of years. We'd saved a bunch of money. We'd moved back to Canada to grow up and start a family. And we bought a house with every dollar we had, so we were literally down to zero. We had to rent out half of it to afford the mortgage and, get started. Right. Right. And we were stoked, like super stoked, that we had a house. Right. So, I went back to work. I took a job selling cars, because I was like, well, that seems like a grown-up job, Right. Like, I didn't want to go back into the restaurant industry, because I felt like I need, Liz was pregnant, and I felt like I need to, like, grow up. Right. So I started looking at, like, grown-up jobs, but when you don't have any skill, there's not a lot of, like, good grown-up jobs. I was looking at, like, hotel manager, and not like a good hotel, like bad hotel.
Like motel manager, really.
Yeah, like, which isn't really a manager. It's like,
yeah, exactly. You're just there to make sure it doesn't burn down.
Right, exactly. And yeah, so, like, I interviewed for, like, that kind of stuff, and And I was like, man, I could sell cars. Like, how hard could selling cars be? Like, I'm going to do that. And I bet you I can make a bunch of money. So I started selling cars. And then my best friend owned a really busy bar. And he's like, hey, come work with me. And I was like, bro, I'm not going back into that industry. And he's like, well, how about you run the door? Because we need somebody with like more tact, you know, that's not a gorilla,
Right.
you know, because this was like the busiest bar in the city. To like let the right people in, keep the wrong people out, like do it with just some finesse, you know? So I was like, yeah, I could do that. And he's like, in worst case scenario, we know you can handle yourself. So no big deal, right? I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So I sold cars in the day. I worked security at this bar and nightclub at night. And my wife went back to work serving tables again, you know, while she was pregnant. And it's funny, like the last night she worked, she worked in the same bar that I ran security at.
Okay.
And she turned with this like huge belly, just monstrous thing. And she hit some guy with her giant belly, like while she was traying drinks and everything.
Yeah.
He said something, I don't remember what it was, like, you're too fat to be working here, or something like that.
Right.
And she was like, hold on one sec, like hold that thought. And she came out and grabbed me, and I came in, and then he left the building in a hurry by me, you know, and then we were like, maybe you shouldn't be working any more shifts.
Yeah, right.
So she went home and started doing her thing. Anyway, daughter was born, and it was probably 30 days. Like, you know, people have those like epiphany moments, or like as soon as the kid's born, they're like, everything's different.
Right.
I didn't have that. It took like 30 days for mine to kick in. And it was because I was working the car business basically from dawn till dusk, and then I was working at the nightclub. So in that first month, the only time I saw my daughter was when I left for my lunch break, and I would drive 15 minutes to my house to just hold her for like 2 minutes.
Right.
And then I would drive 15 minutes back, and then my break was over. Right. And it crushed me because, you know, I went to this psychiatrist for a while around the stuff with both my dads. And he said that people only go one of two ways in your scenario. They either become worse than their parents, or they go the other way and they go completely the opposite direction.
Right.
And in my particular case, I went completely the opposite direction. Like everything I valued was around raising my children in a loving, supported, you know, balanced upbringing.
Right.
So, you know, maybe 30 days into this 2 minutes a day with my kid, I just cracked. I was like, I don't even want to be a dad if this is the way that this is going to be.
Right.
You know, this is just, it's not going to happen. So again, back to square one, like, okay, great. How do you solve it? It's not like I have some amazing degree. It's not like I come from money.
Right.
You know, I'm not an athlete anymore, so I can't like get a big contract. I don't work in the Caribbean anymore where I make great money because I'm back in Canada. Like, so what's the solution? Right. And yeah, man, I just like opened up the newspaper for like a week straight and looked up business opportunities. And if you've ever looked up business opportunities in a newspaper, it's like the scammiest shit on earth. There's
just
no
the worst, like old school clickbait copywriting. Just
absolutely, there are no opportunities in the business opportunity section. There are only opportunities for you to give somebody some money.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And I don't even know if that exists anymore. But back then, the funny thing, I wasn't even looking at the job section. Like the job section didn't even exist in my peripheral view. Like I needed to do something different than the job world to create the life that I wanted. And sure enough, I ended up on some pre-recorded network marketing. You're going to be rich in 7 months. three-wayed to somebody who told me how great their life was, to
Right.
like the whole thing that they build it around, and boom, there I was in a network marketing company, and I was like, that's it. I'm gonna be rich.
I love that story so much, because it's a complete different mindset. People who look for a role to fill and people who look for an opportunity to take advantage of. And it's not that one is better or worse necessarily. I mean, I think at different times in my life, I've needed both. But it's a completely different mindset. I mean, you're 100% right. Nobody is looking at the job opportunities and then going to the biz op, or vice versa. Like, people are going straight to one or straight to the other just because that's where they're at.
You're either that's your personality or that's your mindset at that moment in time, right?
Right.
You're not going both. Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I love that. So network marketing, and I just want to pause for a moment. I know network marketing gets a lot of hate. I know listen, it's not a perfect industry. There's a lot of things wrong with the industry, but it is still one of the best ways for somebody to go from 9 to 5 to having a little baby side hustle of their own that doesn't require them to have a boss. It gives them some of that independence and some of that autonomy that they want doing something else. So I know when people hear network marketing, you usually get one of two answers. Either it's the worst thing in the world and it ruined my life, or it's the reason that, everybody in my family is going to be rich forever. And I'm kind of in the middle. I think it's like a tool, right? It has an appropriate application. And honestly, I think your situation is probably the perfect one. Like you said, no skills, no education, really, not a lot to contribute to the job market. So you ended up in network marketing. So where did you go from there, and what did that look like?
I watched this Joe Rogan podcast today, and I can't remember the guy's name. He was interviewing a Navy SEAL on there, and I know you're feeling on Navy SEAL, so we won't dive into that. But I can't remember his name, but anyway, he was saying so the worst people he's ever met in his life are Navy SEALs, and the best people he's ever met in his life are also Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And he's like, so don't look at like the job role.
Right.
As like, that's going to make them something they're not, right? He's like, the person is just exacerbated by it. And I think that network marketing is probably the same thing, right? Like, some of the greatest people I've met are from there, and definitely some of the most evil human beings I've ever met in my life are from there. Unfortunately, I think the business model is flawed, and I think it's set up to fail.
Right.
And I won't go into too much detail on that, but what I did love about it is that because the business model is, in my opinion, is kind of flawed, how they hold it together is through we, right? It's a lot of we. It's a lot of us. It's a lot of personal development. It's a lot of coaching. It's a lot of pouring into you guru books and business books and aspiration, inspiration, perspiration, all of that. Right. And if you've never been exposed to that, you feel like a plant that's been starving in the desert, and you feel like, oh, I finally found my tribe, like people who get me, and it frees you to think bigger, where you've always been like, I want to think bigger, but if I think bigger too loud, like, people will get mad at me, or like, the crabs in the bucket will pull me down. Right. So, when you get into that world, it's exactly the opposite. It's like, you can do it. If you work hard enough, you can have whatever you want. Look at all these examples, blah, 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 and it really rewires you if you're ready for it, and that's definitely what it did for me. It was that garden hose that I was looking for, and I was dying of thirst. Like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to change my life? And that's what it did for me. And, it was also the catalyst for what ended up happening in my later life, because everyone else was like placing newspaper ads and doing home parties and stuff like that. And I was like, man, there's gotta be a better way than this. This sucks, and I started marketing online, like pre-Google, to generate my leads. And I went from, 0 to number 2 in the company in 14 months. and then what happens then. Now you're the big fish in the very small pond. Network marketing is a small pond as it is,
right?
In the grand scheme of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being, number 2 in a company, that's a really small pond, but they build you up to be this like, messiah, right? So, now not only did I have some skills, I had some money, I had some recognition, I had some notoriety, and I loved it. Like it was like my whole world was shifting, and all my dreams were coming true. And it was just first after first after first, like first cool hotel, first, business trip, first,
right.
First $10,000 a month, first $50,000 a month, first time flying first class, first time having a suite at a hotel. Like it's just first. And it was awesome. But most importantly, I got to work from home. So I was getting to experience all those things while doing what I was driven to do, which was raise my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was just for those first like 3 years, everything was just, it couldn't have been better. Like emotionally, it was insane.
So there's one thing I'd like to talk about from that story that I know is super relevant as for me as an entrepreneur. And I think it's a battle that we probably all face in different ways, but you talked about seeing the way that things were done and just kind of being like, this feels slow, tedious, whatever. I'm going to find a better way, and I'm going to get on Google and I'm going to do ads, and, ignoring the fact that you were part of the Wild West of internet marketing back then. I'm curious how you balance, and if you even thought about this at the time, but I'm curious now how you balance the desire to go fast or take your time, and, how you think about when you need to do one or the other, because I can definitely admit in my own life that sometimes the desire to go faster and harder has crippled my success at something, because I needed to actually, build on the fundamentals and allow it to mature in its own time. And I was kind of forcing it. So I'm just curious how you think about that now. And if that's something that if you still have that urge to just like faster, harder, stronger, or if you've, come up with a different approach.
I think like those are different lifetimes, right? Like for me, my goal was back then was to make $30,000 a month. Mm-hmm. And work 3 hours a day. Those were the only 2 caveats.
Right.
Because the money was just to facilitate raising my family.
Right.
That was it. So I knew that in my head, I could generate 100 leads a week. I could follow up with all of them. I could get 20 of them onto a presentation, and I could close 3 of them. Right. And so that's literally what my goal was. Like I didn't even want to make more. I had a friend of mine that was doing $100,000 a month, and he was like, dude, you could be doing $100,000 a month. I was like, yeah, but I don't want to work 10 hours a day.
Right.
Like that would defeat the purpose of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so, back then it was just a means to an end. There was no legacy play, in it. And to be honest with you, we can talk about legacy too. I'm one of the few people who doesn't believe in or care about legacy. But now the difference between the first 10 years of my life and, in business and the second 10 years of my life is that the first 10 years was just means to an end and chasing what's working. Right. And so you have like these big ups and then downs and then ups and then downs and then ups and then downs. It's very roller coastery. I went from making no money to making, like literally no money to making 10 grand and then making 50,000 in a month. Like that's like winning the lotto.
Right.
When you're in your 20s, to then, almost losing it all to then making $100,000 a month, which really is like winning the lotto, because that's a lot of money to make every month, to then losing it all, to, building up again, and then losing it all again. And that was like the first 10 years of my entrepreneurial journey. And now I'm very boring. I do very boring things. I do sales calls, 5 days a week. I map out the strategy for our clients at 7 Mile. I do meetings with the team. I I help build the infrastructure and the organization and try to find people more talented than me at the things that I'm weak at. I look at things now on quarterly and yearly basis instead of daily basis, number wise. So my decisions are much more macro than micro. And to be honest with you, the results have never been more consistent, but it's boring, like comparatively.
Right.
Because it just doesn't have these, like, when you go from making no money, like one company we launched, which was teaching like network marketers how to generate leads online.
Yeah.
I went from literally $2,000 in my bank account. I went into an RV. I took my kids across the country. I was like, screw it, if I'm broke, I might as well do something fun and take them across the country. So we drove across the country from the west coast of Canada to the tip of Florida. It was one of the best trips we ever had. Kids loved it. Bought an RV, dropped like $30K, threw them all in it with the dog and the whole thing, just like took off. And it was amazing. And halfway through the trip, I was doing 50 inbound sales calls a day, making $60,000 a month in 30 days after we left. Like straight vertical.
Right.
Like that was the first 10 years of my life, was like hit a vein, hit it hard and ride the hell out of it, but not sustainable, you know?
Right.
And now it's very much like the normal biz chart you see where it's like, oh, well, last year we grew like 100% last year. And my CTO or my CFO is like, do you know how amazing that is? And to me, I'm like,
Yeah, it's just, I was thinking, you talk about like regular sort of business metrics. I mean, in the scheme of things, doubling your growth in a year is still exponential for
absolutely.
Any
and for
business.
me, I'm like, this is lame. Like, maybe if we did like 2,000% growth, I would get excited. No, and it's learning to think in those parameters, those traditional business parameters, and it's very steady. It's very consistent, and I think it's made me a better business person to think less impulsive, less sporadic.
So in hearing you talk, I mean, all throughout your story, it seems very clear to me that you've got, either consciously or subconsciously, you've got a sense of the things that are important to you and the things that you value. I'm curious how that applied to some of the decisions you made. Because I could go through some of the business you've been a part of, but I mean, it's kind of been all over the place. There's been a lot of businesses. You've been successful at most of them in very different niches. How did you think about, where to go next, I guess? How was that decision made? Was it strictly a financial thing? I mean, what threads were you pulling on to figure out what the next project was?
If you believe in like guidance or God or any of that kind of stuff, maybe that played a role. I've always just been an idea person and a networker, right? I've always had a network of really successful, influential people online that I've either created or they've manifested somehow. And I've always loved to talk business with people.
Right.
So there's always been some scenario that's turned up in front of me, as something that had just started or could be started or we should start. And my personality was always, if it can be done, it must be done. And so, I can't tell you how many things we've started, a fifth of Jack Deep at 2 a.m. and been like, that's an unbelievable idea. And then the next morning, I'm doing it. Like,
right.
9 a.m., I'm already laying it down, because that's just always been my nature.
Yeah.
Is if it's a good idea, I find it almost impossible not to do, which is why I think the agency has been a good model for me to run. And I owe that a little bit to Jason Hornung, because, a few years ago, I was like, I don't know which way I want to go. And he was like, man, you love new, you love ideas, you love like creativity and launching stuff. And like, that's what agencies do. And then you get it to a certain point and then they just run it. Like operations people run it. So you get to have like all the fun, but none of the stuff you don't like to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds like an amazing idea. He's like, you know, you can have equity in some, you can have not have equity in some, you do rev shares, you can do retainers. I was like, this literally sounds like it was custom made for me, you know, and it.
You froze for a second. Unstable internet, I'm sure.
Rory?
There you are.
There, I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you loud and clear.
Right. So what I was saying is that spontaneity and that newness has been so good for me that almost I'm at the point now where I don't want to hear about anything new.
Oh, nice.
Like it's almost like beating it out of me, you know, where guys will call me like, bro, I got to talk to you about X. And back in the day, I'd have been like, yeah,
right.
let's talk about that. Now I'm like, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
You know, I've turned down more things this year. I'm like, I'm just building my agency. Like it's all, the agency world is almost beaten the desire for shiny object syndrome out of my soul, you know, because you just see so much stuff all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a million rabbit holes you could go down when you're running people's businesses and helping them operate. Like you see so many opportunities. It's very easy to be like, oh, that is a brilliant idea. I could definitely run with that. And yeah, I totally get it. I think though, I think you probably are downplaying a little bit you wouldn't know that if you hadn't already done all the things you've done. And I think this is something that's so true for anybody in anything you're trying to do. Like you won't know what you do or don't want really until you just start hammering nails and taking action. You
Agreed.
just, you know, that desire, that sort of that feeling of like, oh, I'm a little sick of bartending, or I'm a little sick of this 9-to-5 I got, or what, like that's the start. And then from there is no, this is the only path you can take from here to where you want to go. It's like, no, there's a million paths you could take, and only you got to take the first step and then kind of zig and then build a bridge to this one. And you kind of figure it out and you end up where you are, where you're like, oh, I'm good. New opportunities don't appeal as much because I found what I'm looking for, you know, almost across the board.
Yeah. What works for me now for what I want, you know, across multiple different points of my life. And I think in the beginning, you know, somebody once called me ignorance on fire. And it was a great definition because I was just running, you know, and I was just running and gunning and, you know, making money and trying to help people and trying to raise a family. And that's really all it was, you know. But Andy Andrews is one of my favorite authors, you know, said leadership is in such short supply that you can light yourself on fire and walk down the road and people will follow you just to watch you burn. And that stuck with me forever. Yeah. And that was me. I was ignorant on fire. I was like, hey, look at me, I'm doing something. And people were like, they were so starving for leadership. They're like, I don't even know what you're doing, but I'll follow.
Right.
You know? And so now I'm definitely not that human being anymore. Now I am the person that's very like measured and, you know, is more reserved, more conservative. You know, I'm the grow 20% guy now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Back to the normal, you know, growth sheet for a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to necessarily jump into them in detail unless you really want to. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of times, you know, reaching the quote unquote top and then falling and doing that a few times. I'm very curious, you know, for your 1 to 3 takeaways, I guess, if you had from those different events. I mean, you know, how were you different after that than you were before in a way that, you know, served you later on?
I think that I was more resilient after each one because I knew that I could rebuild myself. I had proof.
Right.
You know, somebody once said to me, confidence doesn't come from money. It comes from knowing that you'll do whatever has to happen to be successful.
Right.
You know, and once you've kind of done it once and then like rebounded, you're like, I'm a cockroach, right? You can't kill me. Right. Yeah. That was the first couple ups and downs, you know, as I always felt like I could jump back in and make it work.
Yeah.
You know, when I went deep on our nutrition company too deep, too long. And that one stung me the most because I was closing in on 40. You know, it's different when you got 3 kids and they're starting to get middle-aged, and then, you know, you're not that person that people look at anymore and say, oh, well, you know, he's a kid, he doesn't know any better.
Right.
They're like, dude, you're almost 40. Like, you need to grow up. You know, when you start thinking about having to move into your mom's house and declare bankruptcy with 3 kids when you're 40, like that's some rough stuff.
Yeah.
You know? And that was the lowest that I had ever been in my life. I was 38 at that point, 37, 38. That was the only time in my life that I had thoughts of like suicide start rolling through my head. Like, I'm better off just giving my wife the life insurance policy. Like, I don't know if I'm brave enough to put this car into a tree.
Yeah.
But they'd be better off if I did.
Right.
You know, start having those thoughts, you know, and so when I came out of that scenario and rebuilt myself for the 4th time, that experience changed how I handled money and growth. I no longer wanted to do something that was like wild and, you know, all chips in and, you know, feast or famine.
Yeah.
I was like, I literally can't do that again. Like, if I'm going to do that again, I might as well just go drive an excavator, and, you know, at least I'll know I make $40 an hour and everyone's going to get fed, and like, you know, I'm not going to have to declare bankruptcy and move in with my mom. Right. So, you know, the lessons that we took out of that have really served us well is we have not had debt since that day. We have 1 business credit card. That we have no personal credit cards. We stayed cash rich, low on debt. If we couldn't afford it, we didn't buy it.
Yep.
You know, our cars are paid in cash. You know, they're nothing flash. Like, bro, I was living at the Ritz-Carlton 8 years ago. Like, who the fuck lives at the Ritz-Carlton? Like, that's some stupid shit.
People who hate money.
Yeah, people who hate money. I was just hating money. Like,
just giving it to them.
I you know, we've got a house with a suite in it that we rent, and like all those things that I did in the past, they're just gone. And I'm so grateful that experience happened to me back then, because in the rebuilding, it allowed me to set myself up in a way that my best friend says the goal is to become anti-fragile. Right. And now with this huge crash, you know, I almost feel like a little bit guilty, right? Because we're good. Like, we've got time to think. We got time to ride this out.
Yep.
We've saved money. The business is good. Got a great team, you know, working with me. We get results. I got no debt. Like, I'm in the best position I've ever been in my life because I saw the bottom so close. Like, I saw below the bottom. You know, when people are like, I lost everything, I'm like, I lost everything and I owed the government $110,000.
Yeah, right.
I had to get up 110 to get to 0.
Yeah.
You know, like that, it doesn't get any lower than that.
Right.
You know, when you're like, I need to get a job, and somehow out of that job, I got to feed my family, and pay the government $110K just to get to 0.
Mm-hmm.
That's some low stuff, you know, to be stuck in. But it made me way more grateful and less frivolous and more conservative with my money, which is serving me really, really well right now.
Yeah. And there's so much wisdom in that I don't know what the solution is for younger people, but it seems like when we're younger, especially, I mean, now with the internet and all the business opportunities and make money from home, that, you know, when you're in your 20s, people get so focused on the results. I want to have this, I want to earn this, I want to do that. And they're not that worried or focused on the methods. And so, like you said, you end up with a lot of people who are getting a ClickFunnels 2 Comma award and they're bankrupt. Like they achieve the result of being a 2-comma earner, quote unquote, but they have zero money to show for it because they have none of the methods and the responsibility and the maturity to handle those things well. And then you get older and, there's just that flip. And I think it's the same thing with failure. I mean, people in their 20s, you kind of have this sense that like failure is final. And that's the best time to fail. Like you have no family. You don't have 3 kids at that point. You don't have, any responsibilities except for yourself. Like that is the time to go out and fail hard and fail fast. And then that way you can get to where you got, hopefully 10 years earlier and be able to build from there.
Yeah. And I agree with you on all that stuff. And I look back at it and I think that the issue with why we go through that is because what are we striving for? Like, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you heard a 20-year-old say, my goal is to build a 7-figure business with an 8% profit margin and enough cash flow to hold the business over for 6 months?
Never.
Like, what? No. In your 20s, you're like, I want a Lambo. I want to make 6 figures. Like back in the day, it was like 6 figures. Now 6 figures is like, you need that to survive, right? Right. I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a billionaire. Like the goal is just the figure, right? The goal is not to build the business. And so that's why you see so many people, use the 2-comma award, right? Their goal wasn't to save money. The goal wasn't to build the team. The goal wasn't to build a great product and build lifelong fans. The goal was to make 6 figures.
Right.
Which they did. The problem is they lost it all because they didn't do any of these other things. Right? When I lost everything for the 3rd time, my goal was to build enough residual income streams that every single one of my bills was paid without me actively having to work.
Right.
So we took all our bills, right? And we don't have a lot of debt, right? But still, it's like, okay, to feed my 3 heathens and myself who live in the gym, right? That's like $2,000 a month just in food, right? Okay, so that's that bill. Life insurance is $500, right? Mortgage is $3,000. Just keep going, right? It was to create residual incomes that check that box that wouldn't go away, right? And that became the goal versus making $1 million or making 6. I'd already done all those things, right? It was to build a fortress around myself and become, anti-fragile. And that's what we did, where, we built all of these little businesses and these little income streams that were residual and consistent to the point where we didn't have to work if we didn't want to. And then what that allowed us to do was invest in the business and put cash away and, do all those good things. So, for people that want to become what I consider to be wealthy, my challenge would be figure out what all of your bills are and then figure out how you can create not one business that pays them all, but little tiny income streams. And people are like, what does that even mean? Right? I learned this from my buddy Sean, who ran the landscaping company that I worked for when I was a kid, right? Is he would go out and I remember he bought one of those flashing road signs, those like road construction signs that are on wheels that you hook up on the back of a truck, right? And I remember driving with him one day and he's like, I own that sign. I was like, what? You own that sign? Like, what's it doing on the side of the road? He's like, I leased it to the government. I was like, oh, how much do they give you every month? He's like, $800. Park it right there. And they, it was like a construction, like slow down, whatever they had on it. And he's like, every month that comes in. He's like, I bought that sign, $1,600. Like, but that's bringing me in $800 a month. So it's paid for in 2 months. And then he's like, they've had it for a year and a half. Right? He was always looking to create these mini income streams out of stuff that people, they didn't see right in front of their face. It was right there, but they just didn't see it. And he built that up into rental home, like properties and all sorts of different stuff. He always had like 10 different income streams coming. And that's what we've done. At any given time, we have 8 to 9 different income streams. And some of them are as little as $500 a month. and some of them are as big as, big,
Yeah. And there's so much insight there as well, though, because it's a very similar thing, right? People, I guess at any age will start looking at, well, I want to replace my job or my work income with a side hustle, but people discount those $500 a month streams. Well, that's not, I can't live off that. It's like, well, not that one, but $500 is a game changer. Like that's
and they're like, it's not worth my time. They're like, it's only $500. It's not worth my time.
Yeah. It's like, have you done the math on how many hours you got to work at work to do 500? Like it's just crazy to me that people don't have that perspective. But I think it's, when people talk about wanting time and financial freedom, so often it's like, $1 million living on a beach, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, financial freedom is what you just said. It's just having your bills paid, whether you show up to work or not. Because then you're at least in a place where you can make different decisions.
And it will buy you time. Mike Dillard had a video the other day where he talked about, money buys you time, right? Lack of money forces you to make decisions on emotion.
Right.
Right. So right now, amongst the chaos, am I a little bit stressed out about it? Sure. I don't know what's going down. I'm locked in my house too. Like, now there's some things stressing me out. Don't get me wrong, but paying my rent is not one of them. Right. So then I can look at how I can strategize how we're going to navigate this, or, are there opportunities that I can take care of or whatever. And, you're well aware there's a website development platform, drag and drop platform called Drop Funnels. Right. And I invested in it, a few months ago and became an owner. And I send people to it. So I get affiliate commissions. And my partner, Jordan, just cut me my first dividend check from it this week, $100. And he was like, dude, do you want, is it embarrassing? Or I'm like, no, I got paid.
Right.
I got $100. And that's coming every month now.
Yeah.
And then my affiliate commissions are another, I don't know, $300, $400, $500. Right. That's $500, right? That $500, that pays for, I don't know, the electric, right?
Yeah.
In this house, right? I don't have to worry about the electric thing covered.
Right.
So then the next thing is okay, how do I get the food thing covered, right? And you just keep stacking that up. We've got a tenant that rents a suite out in our house, right? Rent, the total pay is $5,000 here. She pays $2,000 of it. I'm like, $2,000? Now I just got to get $3,000 more, right? It's about cash. It's about cash flow covering your stuff. It's not about how much money you made or how many sales you did. For me, it's how do I get another $500 little income stream that's rock solid, just every month. That gets me way more excited. Somebody brought me $10,000 and they're like, I'll give you $10,000 or I'll give you this $500 residual income that I guarantee is going to be around for 2 years. Oh, I would take that 500 in a heartbeat.
Right.
Wouldn't even hesitate, because I love that safety blanket.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. Man, it's hard to believe we've already been talking for 90 minutes. We've covered a boatload of ground.
You're going to have to edit some stuff.
So much wisdom. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Yeah. And I haven't even covered, several of the notes and the different businesses. I mean, we could probably go on forever just talking about your experience with those. So, first things first, just tell people where to find you or how to connect with you. If you have something that you want people to do, what would be your call to action for them? What do you want the audience to take away?
I think that the easiest place to find me is at aaronparkinson.com. We have courses on there. We have the ability to connect with me if you want to do an audit on your digital marketing. We haven't talked much about that, but you and I work together on a day-to-day basis. You're one of the chief strategists at 7 Mile Media, and our primary focus is helping successful businesses, and we consider successful businesses spending $500 to $1,000 a day on paid media, and we scale them up to $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 a day while still maintaining their profitability. So for those people that might be watching the show, that they're like, I have an idea, or I have a business that's already running and I want to market it successfully online using things like Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, all the traditional channels. That's what we specialize in. So, if you want to have that conversation with me and have me look at your stuff and see if we can make it fly, then contacting me through aaronparkinson.com or even 7 Mile Media. You can go to 7 Mile Media and you can check me out there. That would be the best places to connect with me for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. And I can definitely testify to the work that goes on at 7 Mile. And I mean, it's nothing short of revolutionary what we do for certain people's businesses. And, maybe next time you come on, we'll be able to dive into some of that. So this last question I typically ask, I'm probably going to argue with you a little bit. You mentioned earlier, so you don't really, I guess, think about or believe in legacy. And I would argue that we're probably on a difference of semantics and not a difference of, actually value system. And I'm telling you that based on how important it was when like your daughter was born and obviously with the priorities that you have now. But I'm curious what legacy means to you and how you think about it.
Well, now that you kind of paraphrase it and rephrase it like that, I would say you're probably right. I guess the definition of legacy in my mind is what, you hear people talk about all the time. I'm building this thing to leave a legacy, right? And for me, that never motivated me. Because to me, that's an ego play. And I don't care, nobody's getting out of here alive. I don't care if someone remembers me in 4 years after I die or 4,000 years in business. It won't matter. I've moved on to the next, to the next phase. And so from that definition of legacy, could care less, right? I guess from a purpose and moral standpoint, my legacy, if you want to call it that, what I wanted to create was I wanted to create a strong, happy, grounded, grateful, intelligent family that more importantly than anything felt like their dad loved and supported them more than anything, right? That's why I did all of those things, was to fill the gaps. Yeah. From my own childhood. Yeah. So I guess that will be my legacy. I guess I never really looked at it from that perspective.
Yeah. And I relate to that a lot because I have a similar thought about my kids, but yeah, the whole thing is, it's about the work that they'll be able to do because I equipped them in a way that's better than the way I was equipped. And, in doing so, we sort of evolved the species, right? We continue to get better and better and better. Yeah. I love that. Well, Aaron, I'm so grateful for your time. Thanks for hanging out and talking with me. Just really glad to get this time to connect with you. And like I said, I still got a ton of notes. So maybe sometime in the future, we'll have to circle back around and do another one of these. And
I would love to come back. And next time we need to talk about, what you're doing and where you want to go. That would be an entertaining conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Well, appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Rory.